Welcome to This Explainer. Look, today we're undertaking a journey of profound importance. We are looking directly at the very architecture of classroom management. We're exploring a structured, definitive path to true mastery of your educational environment. Because as educators, we're not simply delivering a curriculum, we are actively shaping the future. And to do that effectively, to truly make an impact, we need absolute clarity, unwavering consistency, and a highly robust framework to address student discipline. So let's dive right in. Now, this brings us to the fundamental challenge literally every educator faces. How do we maintain absolute order without losing our profound humanity? It's an incredibly delicate balance, isn't it? We absolutely require a disciplined environment for active learning to even happen, yet we're dealing with young people in their most formative years. We have to guide them, we have to correct them, and yes, sometimes discipline them. But we must never, ever diminish them. Over the course of this explainer, we're going to navigate a complete ladder of intervention. We'll start with subtle yet powerful strategies, move on to moderately aggressive disciplinary steps, and then explore the progressive discipline model. After that, we'll navigate complex discipline scenarios, confront the reality of referrals, and finally wrap up with 10 essential rules to remember. By the time we finish, I promise you this, we are going to be clear in our rules, consistent in our actions, and compassionate in our hearts. Right, let's begin with Section 1, subtle yet powerful strategies. And let me be absolutely clear about this right out of the gate. The absolute best way to control improper behavior is to prevent it before it ever takes root. Think of this as your essential foundation. This is your day-to-day behavioral toolkit. These are non-intrusive tactics designed entirely to keep the lesson flowing seamlessly without escalating tensions in the room. For example, think about the classic evil eye, just maintaining calm, non-blinking eye contact until the desired outcome occurs, or simply moving your body to stand in close proximity to a troublesome student. It's amazing, really. It has a remarkably quieting effect without you ever having to stop instruction. You can also ask a distracted student to recite or read. Yes, it directs the class's attention to the problem momentarily, but it also helps that student realize that by not paying attention, they're actively failing to understand the lesson itself. And we absolutely must plan wall-to-wall lessons. If you leave 5 empty minutes at the end of a class, students will create their own diversions. You've got to keep them engaged from bell to bell. Finally, using positive, genuinely non-demeaning humor can instantly de-escalate tension and allow a student to correct their behavior without losing face in front of their peers. The entire mindset beneath these subtle strategies is captured perfectly in this profound truth. Loving teachers teach students, and everyone else teaches curriculum. A loving teacher meets their students exactly where they are, on their academic and social level, rather than freezing them out or judging them for falling short. Look, students have a sixth sense for whether you actually care about them. And when they know you genuinely do, discipline problems naturally minimize, because they'll often go completely out of their way to be kind and cooperative in return. But of course, we must also face the reality of our classrooms today. That brings us to Section 2, moderately aggressive disciplinary steps. Because sometimes subtle compassion just isn't enough to maintain the order our students deserve. We have to step up our intervention. When we do need to step up that intervention, a verbal reprimand is often the first moderate tool we reach for, but it has to be properly constructed. We are not talking about a crazed shout across the room. It is a firm, principled intervention. Step 1, state the student's name directly and immediately. Step 2, accurately describe the exact rule they violated. Step 3, outline the corrective action required. And Step 4, state the consequences if they do not comply. The absolutely crucial point here is that this must be delivered calmly, with direct eye contact. You're confronting the student, identifying the problem, and laying the groundwork for escalation if it's necessary. But hear me on this. You must never, ever invade a child's personal space during a reprimand, and you must never resort to screaming. Screaming belittles the student, it backs them into a metaphorical corner, leaving them with really only 2 options: fight back to save face or submit and lose their dignity. We must always model the respect we are demanding from them. Another critical, moderately aggressive step is parent communication. Look, calling a parent early on is a vital act of partnership. You really should make that call on the exact day of the disturbance. But when you get them on the phone, you must stick absolutely to the facts. Just honestly describe the events, the resolutions you've attempted, and your cooperative plans for the future. And please, keep your parenting advice entirely to yourself. Your job isn't to determine whose fault the misbehavior is. Your job is to ask, as a team, what are we going to do about it together? Make sure you utilize your cumulative discipline tracking forms so you have the student's history ready to reference. A parent might be angry initially, that's human nature, but most will ultimately appreciate that you reached out to partner with them before the situation resulted in a suspension. It shows you're invested. Now, when those subtle hints and verbal reprimands fail and habitual rule breaking starts to set in, we move to Section 3, the progressive discipline model. Because justice in the classroom must be swift, it must be impartial, and it must be predictable. What's really powerful about this model is how it builds a ladder of accountability. A progressive discipline model clearly communicates an action-reaction chain to the entire class. It ensures every student knows exactly what reaction their actions are going to trigger. So for a first or second offense, it might just be a verbal reprimand or perhaps their name recorded privately. If they push it to a third or fourth offense, the consequence increases, maybe a loss of specific privileges or that phone call to their parents we just discussed. By the fifth offense, we are looking at parent conferences or an administrative referral. Having this framework in place ensures that your response is never a knee-jerk emotional reaction. It is a calculated, predictable, and totally fair implementation of the rules. I really must pause here to deliver this crucial point with absolute, unwavering clarity. You cannot legally or ethically lower a student's academic grade as a punishment for bad behavior. Discipline is entirely about behavioral rehabilitation, not academic penalization. Do not implement grading policies that assess behavior under the guise of, say, participation points, which so often degenerate into mere popularity scores. We have to keep academic prowess and behavioral compliance strictly, totally separate. However, we all recognize that not all offenses are created equal. And this brings us to Section 4, navigating complex discipline scenarios. Because there are times we simply must adapt our framework to face serious, immediate threats. This reality requires a necessary dual-track approach. The first track is our standard ladder, the one we just talked about, for those habitual minor infractions. But the second track, the severe misconduct bypass, is absolutely essential. When truly severe misconduct occurs, we're talking about physical fighting, bullying, clear threats, or possession of a weapon, you must bypass the progressive ladder entirely. You do not give a verbal warning to a student throwing a punch. No, you immediately notify the administration to protect the learning environment. This bypass protects the integrity of your standard system while ensuring swift safety and order when real chaos erupts. And this inevitably brings us to Section 5, the reality of referrals. I completely understand the profound challenge and frustration when a student returns from the administrator's office completely unchanged. But we really need to step back and look at the bigger picture here. It's a question that plagues staff rooms globally, isn't it? Why might an administrative referral fail to change a student's behavior? We send them away, fully expecting a transformation, and they walk right back in with the exact same defiant attitude. Why does this keep happening?
Let's honestly examine the reasons behind this. Very often, administrators possess confidential information that you simply do not have access to. That student might be facing severe trauma or dysfunction at home, or perhaps they're being relentlessly bullied elsewhere in the building. The administrator might be trying to bring some desperately needed balance to that student's life, rather than just hammering them with punishment. But crucially, we have to ask, does the administrator lack your written documentation? If a student just shows up at the front office with absolutely no context, their version of events will invariably differ from yours. Without your detailed history of the offenses and the progressive steps you've already taken, the administrator just might not grasp the true gravity of the situation. Your written documentation is absolutely critical to making a referral successful.
And we must confront this uncomfortable truth. Sending a student to the administrator means openly admitting your classroom tactics have failed for that specific individual. By sending them away, you are abdicating your immediate control over the situation. And let me be perfectly clear, when you abdicate control, you also abdicate the right to complain about the administrator's final decision. Complaining about how an administrator handled a problem, especially doing so publicly, is a severe breach of professionalism. Now, this requires a moment of deep self-reflection. What if it isn't just one isolated student? What if the whole class remains unruly despite our carefully structured progressive discipline models? If that happens, we have to ask ourselves a tough question. Does the flaw lie not in the students, but in the system itself? If you're facing systemic unruliness, we must accurately diagnose the classroom. First off, perhaps your consequences are simply not unpleasant enough to persuade the students to actually change their behavior. Second, are you enforcing the rules inconsistently? Students have an incredibly acute sense of fairness. They spot hypocrisy instantly. But most importantly, are your lessons relying heavily on boring lectures? Look, if you are constantly lecturing to a disengaged, bored audience, civil disrespect is the natural, inevitable outcome. Misbehavior might just be their way of communicating that the methodology is failing them. We have to foster active, student-centered learning where they are deeply involved, heavily minimizing the idle time where discipline problems inevitably breed. Let us move to our final section. Section 6, 10 Rules to Remember. We're going to look at the foundational bedrock upon which every successful, compassionate, and highly ordered classroom is built. These are your core tenets. First, students are human beings. Treat them with the dignity they deeply deserve. Second, learn their names immediately on day one. They already know yours, so level the playing field. Third, you absolutely must measure a situation before you react, because a quick but terrible response is vastly worse than a slow, correct one. And critically, do not try to physically or aggressively overpower tough students. We are not lords ruling over a barbarian society. We're educators. We're leaders who must rely on intellect, on structure, and on compassion rather than brute force and intimidation. Ultimately, your well-planned, engaging lessons are your absolute best defense against chaos. And this is the ultimate rule. If things are already bad in your classroom, do not let them get worse. When tension spikes, when you can feel a confrontation brewing in the air, you must be the calm center of the storm. Practice measured, de-escalating leadership. Just take a breath, rely on your structured progressive model, and calmly guide the room back to safety and learning. So we close with this thought. What legacy of justice and compassion do you want to leave with the students sitting in front of you today? Because the students you manage, guide, and discipline today are going to become the citizens of tomorrow. They will remember not just the curriculum you taught them, but exactly how you made them feel when they made a mistake. Use your structure, enforce your rules impartially, but always lead with your humanity. Thank you for joining me for this explainer. What step will you take tomorrow to completely redefine the culture of your classroom? Dive deeper into our resources to find out.